Jayden Daniels will be the #1 quarterback in your dynasty leagues at this time next year. We'll tell you why next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. On today's show, we are discussing the players that could potentially finish at the top of their positions at this time next year. He's Michael Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Follow him at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. And Fabs, let's start at the quarterback position because right now, we have Josh Allen as QB1, and he's been QB1 for the last 25 months over on Dynasty League Football. But if someone's going to take him down, who will it be?
I'm thinking it would be Jayden Daniels. And here's the reason why. First off, age. He's 24 years old and is coming off a fantastic season. And I'm on record as saying that the number of rushing yards that he reached last season may not be something he can duplicate in year two. We've seen other rookie quarterbacks who have done that. It's not a long list, who have seen those numbers decline the following year. I still think based on his skills as a passer, the addition of Deebo Samuel Sr., hopefully he's out there and healthy and in good shape for 17 games is going to be a good thing for Jayden Daniels. But Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson are going to be very difficult to pass up. But I just don't see, based on age, like another quarterback having a chance to jump those two players next season. I mean, none of the other QBs in the top 7 based on ADP will be younger than 27 at the start of next season. Only Jayden Daniels, who will be at that point 25. I don't see like Drake May or Caleb Williams or Bo Nix being good enough this season to all of a sudden vault themselves to the overall QB1 position in 2026. So it's tough for me. Maybe this is low-hanging fruit, but because of age, because of what we've seen that he can do on the field, which was phenomenal last season, because he's a dual threat, and I love those rushing quarterbacks, I'm going to go with Jayden Daniels. I don't know that it's going to be something that can happen in reality because Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are just so damn good. But I think he's the only guy who can do it based on skill set and age.
I remember when Kate and I were talking about Jayden Daniels when he got drafted by the Commanders and why we were so high on him. Usually when you go to a defensive-minded head coach, Fabs, those coaches want to play slow, run the football, don't have turnovers, right? But Dan Quinn, like throughout his history as a head coach, and even when he was a DC with the Cowboys, he likes to play fast and he likes to have a lot of plays because his philosophy is his defense will eventually get some turnovers and that's going to flip the game. And that's why I love this fit with Jayden Daniels and Dan Quinn is because I think he wants to get into these high, fast-paced, high-scoring games. I don't think you're going to see all of a sudden this offense come to a grinding halt and become, like what we maybe expect the Jets to be this year. And for that reason, could he lead all quarterbacks in rushing yards and throw 35 touchdowns this year? I wouldn't rule it out.
It's not out of the realm of possibility. And also when you consider that Lamar Jackson is coming off a season that is historic, that is the best season of all time from a quarterback in terms of total fantasy points scored at 430, which is bananas. He's going to see some regression. I think it would be harder for Jayden to jump Josh Allen because he is just so durable and so consistent every single season.
So I thought about going really off the wall here, Fabs, and like saying a name like Caleb Williams, but then I kind of went through all these names. Caleb Williams, I just don't know if he's going to get the rushing production. I think he could have a huge passing season, but you kind of need that rushing production to help you out. Say with Bo Nix, I think Drake May could potentially get there. I just don't see the weapons needed, right? And because it would only be one season of it, I think dynasty managers would be a little bit leery. So my answer is Jalen Hurts. And I think when you're talking about Jalen Hurts versus Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jayden Daniels, I think he's clearly the 4th best quarterback, like real life quarterback. Would you agree out of that group?
Sure.
Okay. The thing with Hurts is the rushing touchdowns are so stable. He's has double-digit rushing touchdowns in each of the last 4 seasons. He's got 52 rushing touchdowns since 2021. They kept the tush push for at least one more year. And yes, he's not young. He's 26 right now. He'll be 27 in August. But he's at least a couple years younger than Allen and Jackson. And if Jalen Hurts has another one of these years where it's 23 passing touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns, he gives you, however many rushing yards on the ground, maybe he gives you, 600, 700. Why couldn't it be Jalen Hurts?
I'm in complete agreement with you because consistency, the rushing chops that he has shown. I think you mentioned the tush push. The one thing that could hurt him is that if the NFL decides that they're going to vote on this thing again next season, and I'm guessing they probably will, and if more teams decide that they don't want it and it gets voted down, that's going to hurt him big time. So
I just feel like that they would figure something out. I mean, it wouldn't be the exact tush push, but like they're not going to take away Jalen Hurts' ability to run near the end zone, right? Like they're going to figure out a way to do that. That's the best thing they do on offense.
Do they more often than they have gone to the running back, Saquon Barkley near the goal line rather than give it to Jalen Hurts? I mean, that's something that you can certainly debate, but it's those rushing yards and especially those rushing touchdowns that make Jalen Hurts so valuable. He's not putting up Dan Marino numbers as a passer. He doesn't need to because of what he does on the ground.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, right? If you get somebody that is this consistent running the ball, Fabs, since 2021, he's averaging about 700 rushing yards per game, and he's missed some time in there. Like that includes the missed time. 700 rushing yards, and you're talking about 13 rushing touchdowns. If he does that one more year, I can just see a world where dynasty drafters are like, okay, Josh Allen's in his 30s, Lamar Jackson getting close to 30. Let's just take the guy that's a couple years younger behind a really good offensive line that's guaranteed to get us all this production.
And one player to keep in the back of your mind, and I've said this before, that Jalen Hurts has a potential doppelganger clone type of quarterback in the league right now who came out of Alabama, and Jalen Milroe. Don't be surprised in a few years if Marcus and I are talking about him being one of the more attractive dynasty quarterbacks out there.
Yeah. Part of me wanted to do some guys that would never do it, but have a 1% chance of finishing. And I thought maybe Cam Ward would be an off the wall name, right? Because Cam Ward is somebody very experienced coming out of school, like Jayden Daniels. He's a fantastic athlete, like Jayden Daniels, right? Now the offense itself, we don't love, but we didn't necessarily love Washington's offense last year going into the season. Right now, Cam Ward is QB19. He's not going to finish as QB1, but is it possible to squint and see a world in which he's QB7 or QB8 next year? I don't think that's a stretch at all.
It's not. I don't think it's a stretch. I don't know that I would put any dough down on that scenario kind of happening, but he's in an offensive-minded head coach's system in Brian Callahan. And I mean, he doesn't have phenomenal weapons, but they're good enough. And he also
reminds me of Washington's weapons, honestly, from last year. It's very similar.
The thing is, he's not Jayden Daniels as a runner. He can break the pocket and escape and make plays with his feet, but I mean, you're not going to see him running regular RPOs and design runs. It's just not going to be what they do with Cam Ward. He can run, but he's not on the level of Jayden or Lamar.
No, I agree. All right, let's talk about some running backs who could finish as the RB1 at this time next year. We'll talk about some very interesting candidates next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever wished that managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're trying to grow your savings or you're planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building your wealth. My family has started to use Monarch Money over the last 7 or 8 months now, And it's unbelievable how much money we were wasting on stupid stuff. But now we are saving more, we're building wealth, and we're just in a much better situation. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are predicting who will be the QB1, RB1, and wide receiver 1 at this time next year using Dynasty League Football ADP. Fabs, let's go to the running back one because this one's really tough. This is a hard spot to crack. Right now it's Bijan Robinson, although Jahmyr Gibbs, his ADP is very, very close. Ashton Genty's not far behind. Who do you think is going to be the RB1 next June?
I like to be bold, but I can't be here. I just can't. I look at it. It's going to be really hard for any running back to penetrate the top two because you've got Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs, who are both 23 years old and just now entering the primes of their career. But if it's a player that I see potentially jumping them and going to one, it's probably Genty, and that's because he's supremely talented. He's a 3-down back. Pete Carroll has always liked to use one running back during his time in Seattle. Chip Kelly is going to get Genty the football. You can argue that he and Brock Bowers are the two most obviously talented players on the offensive side of the football, and the Raiders are going to have to utilize both of them to their fullest extent to be competitive this upcoming season, especially in a division that is certainly a difficult one when you've got to play against Patrick Mahomes and now Bo Nix and Justin Herbert. You got some really good teams in there. So they are going to have
we're not doing the tight end position because there's just nobody that's going to overtake Brock Bowers. So you're right. To your point, Brock Bowers is so much better than everybody else that unless he has a major injury, he's going to be tight end one. But please continue.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, the only other guy is McBride, and that's kind of boring. So I'm going to say Genty, and part of it too is when you're looking at the rest of the top 10 based on ADP. Saquon Barkley is going to be 29 next year. Jonathan Taylor will be 27. Kyron Williams will be 25. And Devon Achane, very talented. I just don't see him as the RB1. Breece Hall, talented. I don't see him as the RB1. Bucky Irving, also in the top 10 based on ADP. Rachaad White's still there. And I like Irving, but I don't know that he's an RB1 type. I thought about Omarion Hampton because Najee Harris will maybe be gone next year because he's only on a 1-year deal. Super talented, is in a great offensive system, but can he put up the type of numbers in year one with Najee maybe hurting his ceiling where people would see him usurping Genty, Bijan, and Gibbs? And I'd love to think that because I love Hampton, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to be boring, and I'm going to go with Genty.
Yeah, it's not hard to squint and see how Genty becomes RB1. He just might get the most touches in the league, right? And he's on an offense that we think is going to improve, right? Like you brought in Geno Smith to stabilize the quarterback position. Jacoby Myers is a good outside slot receiver. They drafted Dante Thornton. They drafted Jack Besh. They've made investments in their offensive line. They brought in Pete Carroll, and they brought in Chip Kelly, who's one of the best run game coordinators in all of football. So everything lines up for Genty to be this superstar running back. And we're just not that far away from that already happening. If you look at the overall ADP, so Bijan 5.5 is his average ADP. Gibbs is 6.1. Genty's 8. That's nothing, right? You're talking about a couple picks that are separating these guys.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if, one dynasty manager just prefers Genty over Bijan because you're getting 2 years younger. And in the running back world, 2 years can mean a lot.
It's huge. And really think about the running back position and some of the prospects that have come out of college. Running backs don't get typically drafted this high. We saw Bijan get drafted high a few years ago. Most of the guys that come out of college and are drafted in the top 5, top 10, they don't fizzle out anymore. They typically will come into, Ezekiel Elliott comes to mind because there's just so few guys that NFL teams think that highly of. And I mean, look at Jahmyr Gibbs, right? All of us were like, whoa, the Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs where? And he has been phenomenal. So more often than not, those guys who are drafted like wicked high, as those of us from New England would say, do end up meeting expectations, and I think Genty's going to be next in that list.
All right. So assuming we're not going to say Bijan, Gibbs, or Genty, I think the next best guy to do it is Omarion Hampton, who you mentioned, and I'll make the case. Number one, in order for him to do this, he's going to have a really good rookie season, which I think he will. Now, do I think he's going to split some carries with Najee Harris? Yes, I do. But remember, so did Bijan Robinson year one with Tyler Algier, right? Like Tyler Algier had a really good rookie season, came in and kind of was a thorn in Bijan's side a little bit. Now that's gone away, right? Going into year three, it's not that big of a deal. You have to have a really strong offensive line. Atlanta and Detroit both have good offensive lines. So do the Chargers. The Chargers have maybe the best tackle duo in the league outside of Philadelphia with Rashawn Slater, Joe Alt. They've got one of the best run game coordinators in the league with Greg Roman. And Jim Harbaugh wants to run the freaking football, right? Like this is just the perfect fit for the player, the situation. I don't think Hampton is as talented as Genty. But one of the things, Fabs, and we love fantasy history and NFL history, is that you look at like the last 10 years, a lot of times the first running back drafted isn't actually the most productive running back for fantasy. Let's just go back a couple years, right? Like 2023, Bijan went 8, Gibbs went 12. Gibbs has been the better fantasy player, although it's been close, right? 2021, Najee Harris was the first running back drafted. Several other running backs in that class have been better, including Travis Etienne. Clyde Edwards-Helaire and DeAndre Swift went ahead of Jonathan Taylor. Derrick Henry went behind Ezekiel Elliott. Leonard Fournette went ahead of Christian McCaffrey. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So I just won't be surprised, even if Hampton's not a better talent than Genty, if he outperforms him just because of the situation.
I would agree because of the age, because of the system, and because of the fact that some of the other guys that are ahead of him based on ADP right now are, 25, 26, 27. Barkley will be 29 next season. So Genty and Hampton were the two guys that I was thinking about. So we are in simpatico here, my friend.
So just real quick, Bijan Robinson as a rookie had 976 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. Okay. Those were his numbers. Where do you think he ranked in ADP going into year 2 at this time?
In Dynasty, I mean, I would still think based on age and based on the thought that Tyler Algier was not going to end up being a pilot fish to his being a shark long term, that he was probably still in the top 10 and maybe even in the top 5.
Yeah, he was RB1 and he was 6th overall. And that's what I'm saying. So, like, could Hampton get to 1,000 yards in 7 touchdowns, and then we still see him as RB1 because Najee's gone and he's just going to get a bigger workload? Like, that won't surprise me at all. So that's why I couldn't be more in on Omarion Hampton at this current ADP. I'm not taking him over Genty, but I don't think there should be that big of a gap.
I would not be surprised if we're talking about Omarion Hampton 2 years from now, like legit being a top 2 or 3 overall pick, not only in Dynasty, but in redrafts too.
Yep, I agree. All right, let's talk about the wide receiver position. Ja'Marr Chase and Justin Jefferson have just owned this position over the last 3 years. Can anyone overtake them? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Rugiet. Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, and maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head over to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off. That is RUGIET.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Fabs, let's talk about the wide receiver position because Jefferson and Chase are clearly the top two players at the spot. Chase has the number one overall player in startup dynasty drafts right now, non-super flex. Jefferson is the number two receiver, third overall. Can anyone overtake one of these guys?
I'll tell you something that gets me aroused, Marcus, and that's the thought of having Malik Nabers in my dynasty startup. I think he's going to be the guy that could usurp both of them. And I wrote about this over at Sports Illustrated. Hopefully you guys will go and check this out. So there's several reasons. First off, he's only 22 years old. He's coming off of one of the greatest seasons of all time among rookie wide receivers. He actually had 109 catches, which is the most of any rookie wide receiver. Brock Bowers had 112 last year, but of course he plays at tight end. He was eighth in terms of receiving yards for rookie wide receivers in the Super Bowl era. He was eighth in fantasy points scored. And he did it with four quarterbacks who are just not great. I mean, Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and Tim Boyle. The Giants have upgraded a quarterback, right? They've got Russell Wilson. Even though he's past his prime, he's still better than what they had. Jameis Winston, I would argue, is better than all four of the quarterbacks they had last year from a fantasy standpoint. And of course, they drafted Jackson Dart. Now, here's an interesting trend among wide receivers that I think a lot of fantasy managers need to keep tabs on. We have not had a wide receiver go back-to-back as the wide receiver one for a while. In fact, Antonio Brown was the last guy to do it. He finished as the wide receiver one 4 straight years from 2014 to 2017. And if we go back 14 more years to 2000, only 3 other wide receivers have gone back-to-back. Marvin Harrison Jr. did it twice, Andre Johnson, Calvin Johnson. So if the trend continues, Jahmyr won't be the number one wide receiver in fantasy football this upcoming season. And also keep in mind, you can also check this out over at Sports Illustrated. Wide receivers who have scored 17 touchdowns or more in a single season almost always regress based on touchdown production and fantasy points. Then you think of, well, and I love this trend, LSU wide receivers are they are alphas when they come to the pros for the most part. Okay.
Do you know I got a question for you. This is a good LSU trivia. Do you know who the last dynasty receiver to be number one overall that wasn't an LSU player?
That wasn't an LSU player? Was
Yes.
it CeeDee Lamb?
No, nope.
It's not CeeDee Lamb. Wow.
It's
Because I'm thinking
it's Michael Thomas in early 2020.
Wow. Yeah. Ohio State. That's boy, Michael Thomas flamed out really quickly.
But think about so like what Ja'Marr Chase didn't get drafted until 2021, and Justin Jefferson was in the 2020 draft. That's why, like, as soon as those guys came into the league, they were instantly the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. I mean, again, we're kind of joking about it, but it's true. Like,
it's true.
Listen, I'll make the case right now. I think if it's not one of those guys that you mentioned, it could be Brian Thomas Jr., who was an LSU receiver. There's only been 8 receivers since the Super Bowl era that have had at least 1,200 yards during the rookie season. One was Malik Nabers last year, and another was Brian Thomas Jr., who you could say all this exact same things about, like had awful quarterback play with Mac Jones in the second half of the year and still was super productive.
And Malik, it didn't matter. I mean, Daniel Jones was the starter. He started 10 games, but he actually scored more fantasy points on average with Drew Lock, which is weird. But anyways, so getting back to it with the LSU tie. Last year, Ja'Marr Chase, wide receiver 1. Brian Thomas Jr., as Marcus mentioned, wide receiver 4. Malik Nabers, LSU Tiger, wide receiver 6. That's 3 former Tigers in the top 6 just last year, right? And then Justin Jefferson finished first in fantasy points at wide receiver in 2022. Both he and Chase were in the top 5 among fantasy wide receivers the previous year, and Jefferson was 6th as a rookie. So you combine that, 2 of the last 3 wide receiver 1 finishes from LSU, and former Tigers have been in the top 10 7 times since 2020. And so I get it. Listen, that's going to be really tough for anybody to jump Chase and Jefferson. They are amazing. Even CeeDee Lamb, throw him in there too. CeeDee's going to have a great year. But if anybody can do it, Malik Nabers is in a situation on a team that finished last, will have a last place schedule with improved quarterback play. And they didn't add anybody in terms of the pass catchers. They still have Darius Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, what they got? Zach Pascal? Who cares? So he's still the dude. And the targets are going to be there. I can make an argument that Nabers is a better dynasty startup number one wide receiver than Chase and Jefferson too. You can.
Yeah, the ADPs are very similar. Justin Jefferson 3.0, Malik Nabers 3.1. So you're not far off. Like, he's already there. It's not going to take much. If Malik Nabers has a monster September, he's probably going to be the wide receiver one.
Listen, man, you're preaching to the choir.
Yeah.
He has got everything that you need in a potential wide receiver one finisher. He's now got improved quarterback play, a last place schedule to play, very little competition, and he's from LSU.
So I will mention Brian Thomas really quickly, because Thomas actually outproduced Malik Nabers last year. There's just a chance like he's Randy Moss 2.0. Like, they got this guy that's 6'3", 220 pounds, and that can run in the low 4.3s. Like, maybe with a healthy Trevor Lawrence and a modern offense, he's gonna be our guy every year. That's 1,400 yards and double-digit touchdowns. But if I had to go someone outside of LSU and not pick a Tiger, I think I would go Drake London. And this shouldn't be a surprise.
I like this one too.
Yeah, it's just for a guy to be the number one receiver, they've got to be young. Drake London's that. He's 23. You have to have some already established years of production. He has that. He had almost 1,300 yards last year with a washed up Kirk Cousins. He averaged 118 yards per game in the 3 Michael Penix starts. I don't see a lot of target competition there outside of Darnell Mooney, who's more of a complimentary player. I just won't be surprised if Drake London with Michael Penix on an offense that we think is going to be really good, with a defense that we think is going to be really bad, ends up being that guy. I think it would be a stretch to say he's going to be wide receiver one, but could I see him jumping like CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's younger and maybe more productive? Sure.
It's funny too, because over the years, I would always poo-poo USC wide receivers, because for years they deserved to be poo-pooed, because when they came into the league, they were duds. Yeah, I get the Mike Williams.
Big Mike Williams, right? Dwayne Jarrett.
So many of them. But now that's kind of flipped, right? Since you've had Amon-Ra St. Brown and obviously Drake London have come
Michael
into the
Pittman's
league
a good player
and done very well. Pittman's been a good pro as well. So that's kind of flipped. But it is funny how those trends existed, especially with USC wide receivers, USC quarterbacks. You could also, I'm not saying anything about Caleb Williams. Okay, whatever. I remember when he got drafted, though, I was thinking, okay, Carson Palmer is really the only good USC quarterback that's come out of that school and done well in the NFL. And then the Bears draft history has not been great. And I'm like, oh no, if those trends combine, Caleb Williams out, we all think that that's going to be a situation where Caleb will be able to overcome that kind of thing, though.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, Fabs and I are going to do a round one mock draft, a non-superflex mock. We'll do a superflex one later in the summer, but we're just going to mock the first round to kind of see where we're at with these players. Make sure you tune in for that. Follow Fabs on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here on Friday.